So I am very happy to have one of the founding fathers of one of the, at least in my opinion, most important labels of the 80s, 90s, and also later on in American rock history here with me, Tom Hazelmyer from Amphetamine Reptile. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure and our honor. First off, I always like to ask, if at all, is there any kind of band merch that you got on or anything else that you want to promote right now?
Yeah, no. I'm not big on promotion.
Then I jump in and promote my friend Eugene's band, Buñuel from San Francisco / Italy. Something that you probably know and that you probably enjoy. A lot of noise.
I guess I'm promoting Carhartt. So,
well, as if they needed
the check will be in the mail. Yeah, the check will be in the mail later from them.
Yeah, of course, like the 6-digit figures, right after the car.
Exactly. I guess they just got rid of Kane and it's wide open now. So
you got to do what you got to do, right?
Exactly.
Second of all, Tom, where are we catching you right now? It looks like some kind of library / music room, but where?
It's my office, yeah.
And where is the office for all those?
It used to be one of the kids' bedrooms, and now after they took off years ago, I moved out of the house because all my kids are older now. It became the office / library / music room.
And thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you live in Minneapolis, right?
Correct.
So I got to ask that. How good is your German?
9.
I got to ask that because I'm very sure it's not a pure incident that 2 of your band names are homophones in German. Totlachen?
Okay. It's more Yiddish than German, but...
Yeah, but it's like, if you just put a space in between it, then it's like, that's also saying in German, right? And the second one is Gier. I don't know how you pronounce it. Do you want to say Gierjammer or is it Giyama?
Oh, no, Gierjammer is just straight up English Motorhead reference. Not the band Motorhead, but like car enthusiast.
Yeah.
Jamming gears, like when you're shifting.
I know, but as I saw Totlachen, I thought that was also a homophone because it means whining in German, right?
It means what?
Whining, like, you're gejammer, it's like, I don't want to hear you whining all the time.
Well, the first one was back in the early 80s, and that's what's like, there was like a lot of Midwestern hardcore bands were, Mech Mensch and Die Kreuzen and
right.
There's a lot of that going on. And that band that you listed, Todlachen, was a hardcore band from that era, 81, 82. So we're a bunch of teenage kids, and it was like, it's cool at that moment. It's like, it was more serious if it's in German.
Of course, because we Germans, our butterfly is Schmetterling, as everybody always mentions.
Exactly.
I usually do not ask questions like the following, but as it's still a very, very fresh thing at the moment when we are recording this, and I know that you're a pretty open and straightforward guy, how hard did the news of Mimi's death hit you last week?
I'm sorry, I missed it.
How much did the news of Mimi from Low hit you last week?
I didn't know. I didn't really run with those guys. I've only met Alan once. So it was just kind of one of those, like, really unfortunate. It was a bummer. I got to say, it was, for somebody I didn't know, it probably hit me more just because I had so many close friends that were really good friends with her that were upset. And it's harsh just to think of a mother of 2 children, checking out that early is never a good thing. So
it is, right?
Yeah, but I mean, for me personally, it's like I wasn't, we weren't even acquaintances. So it's almost, I don't mean
it's a friend of a friend of a friend, right? No, I get you. And then, of course,
it did hit harder than normal if somebody you don't know dying, just because there were so many of my close friends that were, really good friends with her. So that, you feel bad for them because it definitely tore some people up. So
I also know a few people who it really did. But then we also, of course, got to talk about the reason for this interview being a new Melvins record, which is already out for a few months by now. And I must say, the first thing that I thought was Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Yeah, because nobody bothered to read what it said.
Yes, it is.
Over and over online. I think I even started putting it on like a copy, was just like, bad, and then all capitals, mood. It's a play on Bad Moon. It's playing with the Creedence Clearwater, but literally people read it as Creedence, bad moon rising. It's like, no, that's not a moon.
I gotta admit, it happened to me too. But still, I love the record.
If you're going to reference somebody, CCR is not a bad place to start.
Definitely not. So. But this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first non-live full length that the Melvins have put out on AmRep in 24, 25 years, something like that. Is that correct?
As far as exclusive to us, yes. I mean, we've been doing so much the past 10 years. Like variations of new albums they had that are on Ipecac, or EPs of songs that were coming out on an Ipecac release, maybe with some other things. So, I mean, to my thinking, it's not that big of a departure. I mean, we've just been steadily working on shit for God. So actually, it's more than 10 years now.
So it's not like a former love come back, but it's a steady relationship, basically, because you mentioned they put out a lot of live albums. They put out a lot of live albums.
They've been cheating on Ipecac behind Ipecac's back with me the whole time. So
so you're
I think it's an open relationship scenario.
Yeah, it must be, because you also were in bed with Ipecac with your project Haze XXL.
Yes. No, I mean it's not I understand, like it's always been a very rigid thing for people, like, I have a deal with this label. And Ipecac doesn't really function that way. I don't function that way. It's if Buzz comes to me and wants to do something, we do it, kind of thing. Yeah. And he doesn't, Ipecac doesn't work. It's on a like hardcore major label style contract. Like, get in there, guys, get in the studio. You got 10 minutes to get us a new album.
Yeah.
They're so it's kind of in a really gross, disgusting way to put it. Yeah, it's an open relationship.
Would you say that both labels?
Hopefully, like most open relationships, this is actually working for a long time.
Well, this one definitely is, right? Would you say that in a way both labels, from a business point of view, and let's see the inverted commas here, from a business point of view, they work pretty similar, don't you? Because I guess that you're not the guy to write down contracts for 7 albums or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it's like, to my thinking, there's like 2 eras of AmRep. There was the first phase, which was from inception in the 80s through like 2000, where we were a serious label trying to function as an indie label with, PR person and a guy who ran the warehouse. And there was like, a handful of us working full time doing this and dealing with distributors and college radio and blah, 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 blah. And then there's this phase of AmRep, which is I've got it stripped down to me doing everything from the art to stuffing the records. And then I've got my guy, Rob, who comes in 2 days a week to fill the mail order, when we put a record out. And it's literally down to just the creative part that I wanted to do. So on that level, I'm not functioning like Ipecac at all. Ipecac is still doing the legitimate, indie label, playing, the whole field the way it's, supposed to be done. And I'm not really set up for that. And I generally don't have any interest in doing that again. The reason I quit doing it in 2000 was the writing was on the wall, big as day, that the whole thing was changing, that structure was going to be getting tougher and tougher. And I think Ipecac has always done a really good job because they've got some, quality stuff and they're stable to be able to roll with the punches of how hard physical distribution is now.
Yeah.
Whereas I've set my stuff up to deal with, bucket, we made this. You want it or not? You don't want it? Fuck off. Here it is, and we're done. Now we move on to the next thing. So it's a different structure too, where I don't keep back catalog around. That's one of the reasons it's really small, limited runs is you don't have the space. I don't have the wherewithal to do it. Distributors, all that shit. It's it's a 2-bedroom apartment above a bar. So we couldn't keep a whole, physical catalog in stock. It's like, I want the shit out of here. And that was a part I loved about making records all along, is like the conception, the inception of it, the birthing of it. And now it's done. And anyone will tell you, it's like, after that, it's no fun. It's no fun going back into the warehouse or having to repress a 2-year-old record that you're over, the band's over, everyone's moved on, we're on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So to my mind, I just kind of set it up more for me and the bands than trying to play the game by the rules that are set up, And a lot of people have a hard time with that. 10 years later, I still get people bitching about the way.
Yeah, always right. Of course. So basically, because you say you're not playing to the rules. Yes, you are playing to the rules, your rules. And I think that's also showing in the way that you are working, the stuff that you're releasing. Of course, the roster is definitely not as big as it used to be. But on the other hand, one must say that with a lot of the AmRep stuff that has been released over the last couple of years, one sees that this is a real love affair. It's not a job anymore, right? It's just...
No, it's not the day job either. So it's like I'm not tied to it, sink or swim. I've moved on that, the day job had switched years ago. And so now it is literally, the part-time thing of doing what we want to do. And me and Buzz have always been in sync with each other, where we trust each other. I never ask him what he's going to do, musically. Like, I think it's time for you to get serious, and I want to rock opera. No, you should give us that type of shit. And he doesn't look over my shoulder when I'm doing the art. Like, no, no kittens, or whatever.
Well, I want kittens, so I'll do kittens. But also, let's clear that up, because I know a lot of people that I've talked to lately were like, "Oh, AmRep, they were really big in the 90s." And I'm like, dude, I think you got something wrong there, because doing a little bit of research, and to clear this up, even back in the days when AmRep was, of course, a huge thing, I think I heard somewhere that you're still at that point where only like 4 or 5 people doing it, right?
Yes. There was that was a constant. The perception always was that we were bigger than we were, because we did shit right. As far as if a band was touring, we supported that band really well. And if you go talk to any of the bands from back then, when we did the tour support, it's like, they'd show up in a town, and that the record stores in that town fucking had the record. The radio station in that town had the fucking record. There was posters up, because we'd call in favors with people to make sure posters were done. We did a really good job. And that so the perception was we were this massive functioning thing. The graphics were really good. But it was just a bunch of efficient, people up in the Midwest cranking it out and working really hard to do it, because we all loved what we were doing. So yeah, people, to get the same product and same quality on a major label would cost 10, 50 times what we would be able to do shit for, It's a case in point was like, we do goofy shit, like make matchbooks. Like I just saw somebody had posted a picture of them. I'd forgot about them for years, but for the Cows. And it was to promote a new album like Horn, and it, had a funny line on it. But we knew all the clubs, because we were already sending them, posters for the tours and stuff like that. So we're sending out a box of matchbooks to these clubs. Well, you're sitting in Des Moines or Tallahassee, Florida, and you see like the Cows have matches. You're thinking like it's this huge PR machine, thousands of people throwing money around. Hey, bar, we'll pay you to take these matches. No, you just send them the matchbooks, and they're like, "Fuck, free matches, cool. Throw them out, give them to the
Yeah.
And there was a lot of creativity too on figuring out how to do shit for nothing. And everyone always assumes that it costs money, and that sometimes it doesn't. How you do it.
Sometimes it only costs a few hours of sleep, right? And that then already gets you very, very far.
And back then too, it's like shit. Like shipping didn't cost. You didn't have to take out a second mortgage in your house to ship out 100 posters like now.
Yeah. So it's also interesting, like I still heard people saying like, "Oh, AmRep, that is a huge thing." I think that is something that you also in a way benefit from, right? So the label has a certain institution character, so people still take the name of AmRep really serious. So if you're on the label, it's still a huge
two
thing.
ways, which is we're always trying to fight that, because people would take that one step further and extrapolate that there was an AmRep sound.
Yeah,
which I used to drive me fucking insane. At a certain point, I just quit giving a shit about it. But it drove me insane because it was just like, how the fuck does this band, Boss Hog, sound like the Cows, or the Cows do not sound like, and go down the list. And it was like, to my mind, like, how you, I mean, that was a laziness of a lot of critics back then, for sure. The downside to being perceived bigger than you actually are is then I ran into a couple times where bands wouldn't work with us because we were too commercial. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm asking you to be on a compilation called Dope, Guns, and Fucking in the Streets, but you're too precious to be on there because it's too commercial? Jesus Christ, dude. So we'd run into some of that kind of, it was always a, give and take. There's advantages to it, but there's also, the downside. Or a band, literally, I want a $50 million advance. Have you listened to your band? Do you know what's going to happen with your band? We're going to sell 3,000 records. That's what's going to happen with your band. Because I used to say this to bands when they were new and they'd kind of have misconceptions about they're going to be the next Nirvana. I'm like, can you imagine us playing your record in a shopping mall? And they'd go, well, no. I go, there you go. There you go. We're not a commercial operation. It's not going to happen.
But what did you do if a band told you, yeah, we could see us do that?
I'd probably have to sit them down and have them play the record. Like, really? Let's play this next to Stone Temple Pilots. Do you think these two things are compatible? Because I don't see it. But
yeah. I mean, like there of course were some amazingly successful artists on AmRep. Of course. I mean, like, you had some really successful bands. Jesus Lizard, Today Is the Day, Helmet. I mean, like, Helmet, come on. They toured with Pantera and Slayer.
Really great. Yeah, I mean, Jesus Lizard were touch and go. I'd have loved to have them because they were one of my favorite bands back then by far. And Scratch Acid before that with Yao. Love that stuff. Helmet, definitely from day one. I mean, we did the first single and those guys skyrocketed at the time. It was kind of crazy. I mean, I remember talking with Paige saying, I hate to see you go because we love you guys, but man, it's starting to become a pain in the ass. Like, we were becoming the Helmet label for a while there, like literally just trying to keep up with all the requests and having to shove everything out of the way to keep that stuff in print, unlimited budgets and stuff like that. So
did that also in a way affect your roster building? That, like, a lot of clones, like Helmet clones, tried to come onto the label at the time?
I was told that later on. There was an intern going through demos and he was rattling off like all these bands that became huge that had sent us demos, and they were just kind of like, meh. Like, I already did Helmet. I don't want this. It's like, we already did that. Like, one was he's holding up a demo. He goes, "This is a fucking Limp Bizkit demo." I'm like, I didn't like it. What do you want? It's like,
it would have made us millions.
I could have been sitting by a pool in Hollywood. No, I'm stuck in fucking Minneapolis still, freezing my balls off.
Oh, come on. You went back there, so it's your choice.
Yeah, there's that. The older I get, the more I question that choice. It's like,
well, I mean, like,
Texas is good.
I mean, like, you went from Minneapolis to Seattle, back to Minneapolis, right? So, I mean, like, there must be some kind of connection to the city.
Yeah, it was called actually it was called a kidney stone when I was 22. I'm sure you've heard stories of how great the American medical system is.
Yeah,
Well,
it's the best in the world, next to
I had saved
Brazil.
up a couple $1,000s, which was a fucking fortune to my 20-some-year-old ass.
Yeah.
And the whole plan was me and the wife were going to move to Seattle because I left Seattle. The whole plan originally was go to Minneapolis, round up our shit, wrap things up, and we're going back to Seattle because we loved Seattle. This is in 88, 89, somewhere around there. And been back a year, kidney stone, have to go in the hospital. They go up the, up the penis. It was overnight surgery. So I was in the hospital for one day. Get the bill, $2,000. It's like, motherfucker. Wiped me out. I've been here ever since. So I always joke that it was like a kidney stone that kept me here because the plan was to get the fuck out of Dodge.
But at the same time,
it worked out great that I didn't, because going to Seattle, that was before Sub Pop exploded. And I can't imagine, that would have sucked to have been in Seattle at the same time Sub Pop was going through that insanity that they went through, which was great for them,
Yeah.
But to have to live in the shadow of that versus we're sitting half the country away, being able to kind of create our own thing.
Yeah.
So on that level, I was just like, at the time, even going, man, dodged a bullet there, because that would have sucked. I knew a couple people that were trying to do labels out there at the time, and it was nigh impossible. You think it'd be easier because Sub Pop broke through. So you're sitting in Seattle working with a lot of the same bands, but it's not. It's just like kind of like, oh, you're just a Sub Pop, copycat kind of thing or something. So
first, it's the copycat thing, and isn't it also secondly the thing that all the majors were basically signing everyone that wasn't like jumping into the Pacific at the count of 3, right? So then you also got to find bands that want to work with you. I mean, like, honestly, we both know if Atlantic comes into Seattle and offers a band a deal, and you are in Seattle and offer them a deal, then we both know who we're gonna go for
generally
in 95 of 100 cases, right?
Yeah.
But that also brings me to a question that I basically wanted to ask a little later. I mean, like, I know that you witnessed firsthand from your own experience, you witnessed 2 scenes explode, like Minneapolis before, with Replacements, with Husker Du, with Babes in Toyland.
Asylum. Yeah.
Soul Asylum before.
Was a little bit later. Babes in Toyland was kind of coming
that
up.
That was more 90s. Yeah. Right. But you know what I mean, right? And then you witnessed the beginning of the grunge era, which interestingly, grunge was only grunge when it was from Seattle, which is like a shit idea, right? But anyway, so you witnessed both of those things. Do you see any major similarities between those 2 explosions, apart from the fact that, as many people like to forget, flannel was not an invention in Seattle, but back in
that one always cracked me up, because there was always the mainstream media always focused on the flannel so much, and the hair. And it's like, all you have to do is look at any promo shot of Husker Du or Replacements or Soul Asylum from 1985, and they all could have passed for a grunge band. The torn jeans, the multi-layers with the flannel, and everyone was wearing flannel for the same reason. It frees your ass off, Seattle's not nearly as cold as here, but it wasn't a fashion choice, Yeah. I mean, you would still see that one guy, the goth with the hair, and being a fashionable guy, but he's freezing his ass off.
Yeah.
He's willing to die for fashion, so you got to give him some props for that. But
you got it.
But also being out there, like, witnessed like how like Soul Asylum were coming to Seattle, and watching like a lot of the people who later became the Seattle people freaking out. The Replacements are coming, or Soul Asylum's coming. I remember I was at a party and we're getting wasted, and everyone's having a great time, being getting drunk, and everyone's like, oh, we gotta put on the TV, the Replacements are on Saturday Night Live. And I'm like, all right, I've seen them 100 times. I mean, okay. But it was just weird to me that they were that devoted And I never really seen anyone document that connection, sonically and I mean, just the way the dress thing, that's one thing, but sonically too, there's a lot of, you listen to a song like Whoa by Soul Asylum, and that could have been on Sub Pop 5 years later. No problem. 4 years later, no problem. Would have fit right into that whole mode, because everyone was kind of playing with the same ideas. That in Minneapolis, the post-hardcore ideas were similar to the ones in Seattle. But at the same time, I'm not comparing the two. The thing that I really, enjoyed being at ground zero for both things was that energy. I've also got to luck out and deal with that a couple more times after that. One was, just the AmRep thing in general. Like, what we were doing in post Seattle kind of taking off, we kind of had a thing, it wasn't as big as the Seattle thing by any stretch, but in New York with like Helmet Was Air, Surgery, Unsane, other bands that were friends of that same crowd, like Cop Shoot Cop. And there was a whole fun, kind of similar vibe going on there. And then later on, I got to see it in the art world when I was doing a gallery, and it was kind of the whole, there's so many different names for it. Pop surrealism kind of movement.
Yeah.
When that was really kind of nascent and just kind of forming and coming around, it was the same energy again. And it got me very excited to see like artists like, Dalek and Coop and Gary Baseman, and just a whole slew of people kind of all, the energy that was happening around that was run into the fray.
So sorry, I was laid off. So you were talking about the energy that got transported by those scenes, right? Did that also then incite you as AmRep again when you got big?
I don't think it was a conscientious, like a upfront thought to mimic what I'd seen at a certain point, because I'll have to back up that the Minneapolis thing was kind of tied into the whole hardcore scene.
Yeah.
Replacements and Huskers were playing a lot of the same bills. Soul Asylum were Loud Fast Rules, at that point almost straight up hardcore, playing with bands like my band at the time and Willful Neglect and a couple other Minneapolis things. So that was a whole, I watched stuff evolve out of one, it was hardcore scene. So when Discharge came to Minneapolis, or Minor Threat came to Minneapolis, all of us teenage kids were like, we're there. And it was this energy was fantastic. And then watching, Huskers, who I was better friends with than any of the other bands were I keep saying, watching them evolve out of that, I left, I go to Seattle. The first time they came out there in '84, I was in Seattle, like watching those guys, listening to everything they're doing, because they're rapidly releasing records at the time. Listening to them come out of hardcore and put all these other influences in, I remember as a teenager, like Bob Mould going, there's this new band I fucking love. They're amazing. They're called REM. I'm like, okay, well, let me hear it. And he puts it on. I'm like 17 going, oh, fuck. Well, what is this shit? This is garbage. I hate this shit. Yeah. But you could hear how that influenced him, in his songwriting, which got a fucking, so much, so great. But getting to watch, them evolve, then going to Seattle, and I was hooked up with the U-Men, and they were friends with like the Mudhoney guys and pretty much everyone out in Seattle. And it was the same thing where it's a bunch of, mostly, not everyone, but a lot of hardcore kids. Like Steve Turner and Mark Armour both came out of, going to hardcore shows in 81, 82 when they were the same age as me. So they're, kids. And now let's bring in the Stooges. Let's bring in, these weird Australian bands like Feed Time, and let's blend it all together and do something new. So getting to see that, it wasn't a formula. It was just this organic thing that would happen. So on a certain level, it's like, okay, let's do it again. Go back to Minneapolis. I want that to happen again. I want this organic push forward. You know, I want to hear stuff, because my whole kick back then was I didn't want to hear the same shit over and over. I didn't have a lot of respect. I guess it's, you know, that's too harsh of a word. But for somebody who, like, you know, in 1981 heard all these amazing hardcore records like Circle Jerks and Black Flag and Husker Du and the whole Boston thing and like, you know, Minor Threat, and then never wanted to change. Like, I just want to stay this way for the rest of my life. And you'll still, I know some of the people that are still, you know, living that. And it's like, dude, it's 40 fucking years later. Give it a rest already.
Music ain't worth shit if it got more than 4 chords.
But to me, to me personally, and I realized like some people that clicked, that made it great for them. And I'm far more tolerant of it than when I was younger. When I was younger, it's like I wanted the new kick in the head. It's like, oh, that was fucking great, but I'm over it. Let's go. I want something new. You know, to me, it was the new, the different. And so when I left Seattle, which was watching all that happen, you know, seeing all those bands like Soundgarden and Nirvana hadn't really played, but the Melvins, that's when I met those guys out there at that time. You know, wanted to kind of continue the same energy, the same thing, which is we can sit down, and even though people may not necessarily be like a hardcore kid, it might be a punk rock thing or come from different angles, but it was like, I want it new, and I want it to kick me in the head. You know, that's kind of
is that also
things. What's that?
Is that also one of the reasons why the AmRep roster was so diverse?
Yeah, because I mean, I wasn't looking to duplicate, you know, the same.
Like you said, you don't want to do a second or third helmet.
Right. It just was not, you know. You know, it's like I had my own band, and that was really kind of more garage orientated than most anything else we worked with. But I wasn't.
You mean Halo of Flies?
I didn't want a bunch of Halo of Flies clones. I didn't want, you know, the Cows were their own fucking animal from hell. And, you know, so on and so forth. So yeah, to me, it was like trying to, because that's how I listened to music, you know, as well, like coming up, especially the era where I really became cognizant of music was kind of that initial, not early on, but like I bought my first punk rock record in 1978 as a kid in Michigan, which was like,
that was like the year I was born.
But it was like the Sex Pistols and the Damned and Buzzcocks, and I got into all that. But I got into it a year later, as they're all like, the Buzzcocks are going off into this weird area, and then you fast forward a year, like, and all of a sudden, with a year later, here's like this whole neo ska thing, which I really loved, like the Specials and English Beat. The Gang of Four, Joy Division thing was happening in '79, which was like mind blowing. Like putting on, first time I heard Gang of Four, I had no reference. I'm like, what the fuck is this? I can't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't place what I can't. My head, you know, can't wrap around it. I used to love that sensation. I fucking loved it. Like, first time you hear Birthday Party, you're like, what the fuck is going on? You know, I can't grasp. And I don't think somebody who can, you know, hearing Birthday Party the first time now is not the same as hearing it in, like, you know, 80 or 81, where you're just like, what the fuck is this beast? You know,
I know
you might have heard like a little bit of this or a little bit of that, or other people that were influenced by them. But anyhow, so the point being that, to my mind, it was all this radical alternative shit that was nothing like each other. It didn't have to be, you know? And that kept proceeding, where I loved hardcore, but at the same time I listened to hardcore, one of my favorite bands in the world was Chrome, you know, and other bands, Pure Ubu, you know, that had nothing to do with hardcore.
No,
so
not at all.
To this open to you know, many different sounds. So it wasn't like we had, you know, you had to dress a certain way, you know, use this type of distortion pedal. The beat has to be this many beats per, you know, there was no formula on that level. It was just like, well, how you hit me at that time, you know, was what got you through the door, I guess.
Then I gotta ask this: when was the last time that you had that feeling with a new band, or a band that you now discover?
It's really I've noticed that kind of
I mean, like we both know that
bit.
it will never be the same as when you're in your late teens, early 20s.
Right.
That will never be the same. But we always discover new bands, right? And when was the last time that you were really punched?
So like right now, like Mr. Flies is a new band I'm working with, and they're mixing up stuff in a different way. That's really cool. But I mean, as far as the last time, like a birthday party level, meteor strike, I can't say that I've heard that in a while. But I also feel that bands aren't trying to do that anymore. Like something shifted, and the best I could pin it on is like right around 2000, where it seemed as though a lot of genres were just willing to sit there and raid the past and not push the ball forward. Let's go, let's do something. And I don't know if that's a fair assessment or if that's just my own bias, but it really seems, I can't think of, I can go down the list of stuff that, the first time I heard the Cramps, which were doing retro shit, but it was amazing, and I kind of compare like Mr. Flies to that in my mind, where it's like they're raiding from the past, but they're pushing stuff into new directions, which I really dig. I mean, so much so that I kind of had sworn off, like, I'm not working with new bands. I mean, we might do a Dope Guns here or there, in which I can, pull in some bands I've listened to that I like. But I always jokingly say it's like I had my heart broke too many times to want to, completely get into a band, love it, believe in it, and give it your all, and then have the world go meh. You're just like, fuck you. And then after about the 20th time that happens, you're just kind of like, you know what, I can't do this. I can't,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I kind of backed off on that until these guys came along, and I was just like listening to, like, they had their stuff on Band Camp, and I'm just listening to it over and over and over, and I was like, I gotta fucking get off my ass and help out the new kids. I gotta go do something for the kids.
Yeah. I know what you mean. And I also, in a way, very often have a feeling as if that what you described as bands,
the calcification.
Yeah,
does that make sense? Like calcification, like the people where they talk about
I know what you mean.
Gland calcifies with age.
Yeah, I know.
It seems like rock and roll was having this calcification. We're just calcified around, metal.
Yeah.
The millennial generation kept trying to redefine 40, styles of metal. It's just fucking metal, dude. It's speed metal. I mean, come on. But no, it's death gore Mortimer metal. This is metallic warfare metal. This is bullet face stopping metal. And you're just like, dude, it sounds like Cookie Monster shit that's been going on for 30 fucking years. That's a really good band, but come on, it's not a new thing.
I know what you mean. But I also think that it's in a way related to labels, because I think that we also find a lot of labels out there who try to reap what the 80s, the 70s, 80s, 90s established without adding something new. And I must admit that, like 3 years ago, I found at least one label of which I can say, okay, they do it differently. And that is the Flenser from San Francisco. They define something that I think like is a new sound. And even though they have like very diverse artists. But I think it's also important, and I think that's something that you also try to do with AmRep. Build a roster that is interesting. Don't always go like, oh, I got helmets, so let's get in 3 more helmets. Oh, I got Today Is the Day, so let's bring in 3 more Steve Austins.
But
I got the Melvins.
In hindsight, that might not have been a bad idea.
Yeah, in hindsight. But
now I'm thinking about it. What the fuck was I thinking? Why didn't you sound?
Who needs a pool? Who needs a pool?
Sign Limp Bizkit. Get the pool in Hollywood. What the fuck is wrong with you, dumbass?
But
and to be fair, there has been bands, and my memory is a piece of shitty Swiss cheese. Lots of holes in it. I can't just like throw out a bunch of names, but over the years there has been bands that I thought came along and I really enjoyed. A-Frames, You know, at the time the A-Frames were doing new releases and playing stuff, I thought they were really fresh, you know, and original. And, you know, so I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. It just seemed like it was very reduced, and kids did not seem interested in breaking into new ground as fans as well as bands, you know. It's like, you know, I'm into hardcore, I'm into metal, I'm into you know, just like you know, I just recently referred to Grant Hart saying that a couple of years, God, 10, 15 years ago. We were at the art gallery at an opening, sitting outside, and two guys with mohawks, you know, GBH and Discharge on their leather walked by, and he said something to the effect of, "Hey, fuckhead, start your own youth movement," you know, because at that point it was 30 years, 25 years after the fact, you know. When that was a radical act. And that's the thing too, like trying to convey to certain people, like, you know, different eras of music that I saw, it was, you got bottles thrown at you from a fucking car. You got jumped by more than a couple of guys because you had a shaved head, or you had a mohawk, or you wore that, you know, that one t-shirt into school, or you know, literally it was radical. And I would get into fights in my school because I had peg leg jeans and a shaved head, you know, with t-shirts and a flannel with a t-shirt. That was enough to, you know, that guy's a fucking weirdo, get him, you know, kind of shit. And like literally having to fight for it, you know. Then that's something like I kind of was hoping I'd be able to watch, you know, youth do that. Like, you know, what is it going to take for you guys to upset you? It's so easy to push buttons and upset the everything. Like, come on, start pushing some fucking buttons.
I mean, like being a teacher, I sometimes have a feeling as if the youth sometimes has a feeling as if A, they ain't been heard, and B, they ain't got nothing to say because everything's been said. So they go to Primark and buy Nirvana shirts or the Stones or whatever is on the new shirt. And then a hideous teacher like me comes up and says like, okay, so you're wearing a Ramones shirt. Cool. What's your favorite song? Song? That is a band? I just like the shirt. But I know what you mean. And I had
a similar one where I got to bum out a guy that worked with me at the bar I used to have in downtown Minneapolis. And he was a kitchen manager, and he's talking to another manager, and he's wearing his leather jacket and has Discharge on the back. And the old crabby boss walked by and said, "Oh, I opened for those guys in '82." It was just like, you know, total fucking like, I've got my own culture, and it's no one understands or knows what this is. It's like, yeah, I know what it is. I used to do that, but that was like 25 fucking years ago, dude. Come on, like Grant said, get your own youth code movement. Let's go, move it on. You're supposed to be pissing me off, kid, not doing shit I did.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think you touched on it too, where there's just like, you know, that whole like, well, it's all been done. It's always all been done, you know.
Yeah, that's what they think
every time until somebody does it different.
Yeah, right. You were speaking about the bar or the bars that you had and have in Minneapolis. I know that there is this Melvins live record, Melvins versus Minneapolis.
Okay.
How involved were you with the conception and execution of that record?
That came together. There was a guy who since the guy who did all the recordings for that has passed away. He took his own life years ago. But a guy that worked with me at the gallery was friends with him and knew the Melvins were coming and said, I got, you know, he's got a bunch of these live things. Let's put this all, you know, together. So my involvement wasn't, it was more like a super fan who had the largest live recordings of the Melvins, and he pulled the ones that were specific to us. And then Wes, who is a burlesque design, used to do what the fuck was the name of his zine? He had a zine back then. Swiss cheese. Can't remember the name of it, but he, you know, wanted to do the layout, and then we physically, you know, literally sat there gluing them together. But It was several different people at that time too. The label was the most defunct it ever was, and it was more a thing just to make the show of the Melvins in Minneapolis something special, because that was what kept my one foot in the game of making releases and stuff. And with the Melvins was Buzz would always want to play the bar, and I always wanted to make the show, put something special or extra into the show than just being another, So it was kind of fun. And he knew that too, by playing the bar. It was outside of the normal live circuit in Minneapolis. So I don't know if you ever had that happen, but if you go to see the same band you might have seen a dozen times, but you go to see them in a new setting,
different.
It puts you a different spin on it. You get a different view of it and stuff. I mean, I kind of figured that out back in the AmRep days, where we would do shows in weird places, because it would just kind of, revitalize somebody to their fan base's eyes. So when the Melvins would play Grumpy's, it was always kind of a different thing, because it wasn't the same 3 bars that you would always see a band like the Melvins, in Minneapolis.
You said that, in a way that at the time that was like the most defunct that AmRep had ever been. Would you say that in a way the Melvins also kept AmRep going?
Oh yeah. I always joke that, I tried to get out and Buzz dragged me back in. Because you'd always, we would always be up for doing wacky shit, for a while there, we did like the infamous single that can still go for up to $1,000 on eBay, which is a blank single. We made 100 of them. Had grooves, but it was just like nothing on it. We joked, that one side was a John Cage, the John Cage 4 minutes of 33 or whatever the fuck that pretentious bullshit was. So we did a silkscreen sleeve. They signed every copy. It was a blank record. We sold them for $5. But now people, and the funny part is, I love that when it sells when you see one pop up on eBay, they'll never say it's a blank record.
No, of course not.
They'll always say it's like, the infamous, shit sandwich single.
Yeah.
And
because if they say it's a blank one, everybody will be like, wait, if it's a blank one.
But I think
that must be stolen.
Anyone who's going to pay hundreds of dollars for a record, I'm assuming knows it's a blank record. But
yeah, but I would guess with the development of vinyl prices and vinyl collectors right now, even a blank record by the Melvins would easily make $200, $200, $300, because I just gotta have it.
Yeah,
when you're talking about different things that you did, I gotta ask that, why did we never get an AmRep Records Cage Match 2?
You talking about with the Unsane?
That is the Unsane covers thing.
Melvins. I think that was just for
that was a tour one, but the Melvins have been touring constantly, so why not?
I don't know if they've
another version.
If they've lined up with anybody. I'm trying to think, because that was a little bit different, because it was like kind of a band from the old school Brotherhood. The Unsane pretty much started roughly at the same time as the so it's a band they came up with. So they're kind of, it's, a brotherhood of that type of thing. I'm trying to think if they've done, they toured a little bit with John Spencer, and we did a split single for that. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of they haven't really toured with a band similar in that vein. They've had lots of young unknown bands they'll bring out on tour with themselves that they like or are trying to support. But it's a little tougher sell, to put together, like, here's that band you've never heard of and don't give a fuck about in the Melvins, split single.
But it would still sell. It would still
sell, yeah. It's just not the excitement they would call a cage matcher. I don't know.
Yeah. It's not, and it's also not as musically leveled like Unsane and the Melvins, right?
It's kind of the same, like I said, they're from the old
not an asymmetrical thing,
old school Brotherhood kind of thing.
Yeah. When we're talking about this new record by the Melvins, I gotta ask you, as you have released some of their records, some officially and some unofficially prick.
It was official. It officially pissed off Atlantic.
Well, that is a good thing, right? But no, you have seen the Melvins in several incarnations, in several lineups. How do you like the latest one with Steven and Dale and Buzz?
It's always it always blows my mind how Buzz can revitalize by picking the right person at the right time.
Yeah.
I think my favorite example of that was when Kevin Romanis, they had some run-ins and Kevin was out as bass player. He was long running and he used to be in the Cows, and Kevin's like a dear friend of mine. It was, it was upsetting that the way that played out. Everyone's made up, everything's better now. But when that happened and Buzz goes, well, I'm bringing in these guys that have this band called Big Business.
Big Business, yeah.
And at that point, I don't think they had a lot of material out. They'd been around, I'd heard them. And I said, what do you mean you're just getting the bass player ready? He goes, no, I'm bringing the drummer in too. I'm like, that's fucking stupid and insane, Buzz. Like, you have one of the best drummers in the fucking world. Why the hell would you need a second drummer? That doesn't make any fucking sense. Doesn't make any sense to me
Dale
whatsoever.
Would now say,
Dale
would now say, I'm 69.
Up until the moment I saw him live, and then I was like, holy shit, why would I even question you?
Yeah. That is true. I mean, like, he has a good touch for it, right? Like,
yeah. And it's like pulling in people and utilizing their strengths. I think Buzz has bigger exposure to pop music than some people might suspect. I mean, he's really broad spectrum, of what he likes and doesn't like is really vast. I think people are often surprised when they find out. I was just bitching to another friend of mine that one time Buzz dragged me to go see Elton John, which I still did not like. But, and he's a fan and good for him. So, but I think that element is there with Buzz. And I think Steven brings that out. Because Steven is definitely also a big fan of, it's hard to encapsulate or quantify, but it's just like, I would not be surprised if Steven knows every Carpenters song. You know what I mean? Like, he loves his California music and pop music, and he's not, bubblegum. He's been into bubblegum. You look at Red Cross and some of the stuff they did. So I mean, it's kind of like that, bringing that out, and Buzz's songwriting makes for another cool, shift twist while still being Buzz. So it's like you can't,
yeah.
It's not like he's not a chameleon. He doesn't change. The color might change a little bit, but the shape is still the same.
Yeah. It's still unmistakably. It's still unmistakably the
crawling
Melvins.
Along a stick.
Yeah. And that's also true when you say, like, when you listen to the new record, I'm like, on the one hand, it has the longest Melvins song ever, and that is the opener. And on the other hand, there are like songs that they are not pop songs, not at all, but they have they have that little nuance in it where you're so like, okay, that is appealing. I'm like, hell, I listened to the record in preparation for this interview. I listened to the record yesterday, and my wife, who's a total, and I love her for that, she's an R&B and jazz lady and soul and everything. And she comes in and I'm just listening to one of those tracks and she's like, oh, that sounds nice. And she meant it totally, honestly nice. And I was like, yeah, that's the Melvins. And I was like, shall I play you another song? And she knows me. She was like, no.
Don't push it. You're pushing your luck.
Yeah, you're right. But that is something that I really like about this new record. Once again, I mean, like, every Melvins record is a Melvins record, right? We don't have to discuss that. But he is able to come up with new twists, new nuances. And is that, and I gotta ask, is that also one of the reasons why you did this record again with him? Why you agreed to do a full length without a
I think he just, the impression we didn't really talk in depth about it. He brought it to me, and I whatever Buzz brings me sight unseen, I'm going to do. That's not.
Okay.
I don't even have to hear it. It's just like, that's. I was earlier on talking about the trust that we have with each other. It's like I'm not going to question what he wants to do. No, to me, it's not. I don't know. It doesn't surprise me. What I'm always in relation to what we're discussing, I'm always hilariously. I see these. There's a certain subset of asshole Melvin fans, very small, but they're every time the Melvins do something different, they're the first ones to rush online and go, "It's over! It's fucking over! And the Melvins are horrible." And you're just like, Jesus Christ, dude! How many years you been doing this? And then the same motherfuckers, 6 months from now will be going, "It's the best ever. Those guys have achieved a new high mark." And you're just like, go fuck yourself, you asshole. How many times you got to play this game? But just over and over.
But isn't it like Waldorf and Stettler?
What's that?
Isn't it like Waldorf and Stettler from the Muppets? Oh, it's the best thing I ever heard. Oh, it was good. Well, there were parts of it I liked. Oh, it was not so good. Oh, yeah, it was horrible. It's the same. It's the same way.
But you see it, watching it now for year after year. You're just like, oh, Jesus Christ. I mean, it amazes me. But they can't figure out that he's not going to, he's always going to be Buzz. He's always going to, there's still that direct link back to the fucking, Eyes Flies and, the stuff off the first record. That's still him. It's still in his DNA. But, it's the only way he keeps it interesting for himself is to, how many times could, it's like you're going to play the same fucking song over and over, or write the same song in 25,000 ways, but it's the same song. I mean, we all remember, as much as like you brought up the Ramones earlier, it's like after, I would always come and go where you're just like, check back in after 5 years, like, yep, still the Ramones, check back out, come back 5 years later, like, what are they doing now? Oh, it's still the fucking, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, right.
And I mean playing that, like, speaking of the Ramones, like you watch that documentary where it's like how sour and shitty it got between the certain members. I think that was part of it too. Is just like, how long can you pound your head on the same wall as a creative person and not, by most bands by now have long since stopped being relevant. They're still just living off. And where you really see that is when you see the Melvins. I don't know how it is in Europe, but it's stateside. I've seen them everywhere across the country. Just recently, like, drove down to Omaha to go see them. And the difference is between them, and I won't name any bands because I'm not slagging them, but bands of the same era, of the same genre, that came up at the same time frame as the Melvins. You'll go to their show and everyone's the same age as me. It's a bunch of 45 to 60-year-old guys that are it's their one night out for this 3-month period. It's the one time they're going to, have a few drinks, that it's that crowd, which is fine. But when you go to a Melvin show in Omaha or Texas or LA, and I've done merch at many of these shows, and it's like more than half the crowd is under 30. At times. And that to me is just like, that's amazing. And that's because the continual renewal and the energy's still there. So that one weirdo metal kid. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There has never been like a real stop for the Melvins, It's not like the Pixies, who had this long period of not being a band.
Right.
And then starting being a live band again, and then some years later starting to write new stuff again. I think that is something that is also relevant here.
I don't think I've ever seen, speaking of that as an example, and I don't mean to pick on them at all, but I've seen it. We've both seen it dozens and dozens of times. I don't think I've never seen anyone able to capture that magic again. Like, once you stop and move on and have this 10-year break where everyone went off and had a whole different life for X amount of years. The only bands I've ever seen that can continue that are like individuals or a band that never stopped. Like, you can't stop without, from my bullshit armchair.
I know what you mean. I also would basically totally agree. I got one example in my mind where the life experience was just the same way as it was and as explosive as it had been before. And I'd seen one of the last shows by Swedish hardcore band Refused.
Okay.
Before they stopped in '98. And when they came back 15 years later, it was the same kind of energy. But, and now comes the difference to the Melvins, live, the band is still untouchable. Where it's like still one of the best hardcore bands I've ever seen. But the records since have been lacking.
Yeah.
And that is where you say, like, you have to be continuous.
The momentum, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen people do it a different way, like Billy Childish is a prime example of, he's changing it up constantly. Renaming the band, new members, but there's still that energy. And when it's been a while since I saw him live, but it's still the same, but once again, it's somebody who's never quit. He never stopped. He never lost that mojo that he got, that got him, propelled him in the first place.
Yeah. And I also think you're totally right when you mentioned the new names of bands and project that he was in. And I think there's also a difference to the Melvins. He always assumes that if there's a bigger change in sound or songwriting or style, then it has to be a different name. Whereas Buzz just doesn't give a fuck about it and just says, like, this band is us and it's always us and we do whatever we want to do.
Yeah, for me, it's the Melvins. That makes life easier. There was a local band, and I won't mention any of the names. Brilliant songwriter and brilliant musician, and he always put together these great lineups. But every time he would do the Billy Childish thing of like, oh, it's a new thing, I got to rename it, and just watch him just go, go from packing in the bar to back to 10 people. Build it up to packing in the bar, and then the band disintegrates, and now he's back to 10 people. And you're just like watching, going, dude, just keep the same fucking name. It's you. You're writing all the songs. You're writing, So there's,
and if you got a problem with it, then give it your own fucking name.
Yeah. And
just call it the John Smith Project, right?
Exactly. But I don't know. To each of their own. I've seen, Billy makes it work. He doesn't seem to lose any momentum. So
no. One last question before we come to our infamous quickfire round, where I'll give you two alternatives and you have to choose. When doing a little bit of research, I came across a description of you that I would like to give back, and I would like to have your notion on it. There was a German journalist who calls you one of the forefathers of noise rock.
Okay. I don't know.
How do you feel about that?
What does it mean, I guess? I always thought it was funny because I think the noise rock, the whole moniker came from just a graphic flair. Like when I was designing the logo, there was stealing part of the shape of the Amphetamine Reptile logo from this defunct corporation called Cyclops. How ominous sounding is that? Cyclops. And they had that shape, but it didn't work just by itself. So I'm like, I need to make it square, doing design. Noise. I'm just going to throw noise back there. Like it had no more thought than it was a design flair. And then fast forward to, 40 years later, 35, whatever the fuck it is. And it's a noise, it's a genre. You're just like, okay, I'll take it. Sure. With all the forethought of like what looks cool. This looks cool.
Yeah. I mean, I would even say there is something like noise rock. There is a genre like that.
Well,
I think that's legit. But yeah, and it has developed. And I think there is a difference between having a genre and associating you with it, because as you said, it was like a style thing, right?
Yeah. How do you, I always marvel at that fact that no one seems to pick up on that too, that 9 out of 10 times anyone associated with a genre doesn't want to be associated with the genre.
Yeah.
Go ask any grunge band if they're grunge. Go ask, how many, original wave hardcore bands, go ask the Meat Puppets if they're hardcore. You know what I mean? Just like, it's like everyone tries to usually run away from being quantified and pigeonholed.
Yeah.
Because it's creatively strangling. But at the same time, it's like, well, fuck you. I don't know. Maybe take some pride in it. You did something. It's better than nothing.
I mean, like, I don't know how Yao would react if we called him like, oh, you're one of the noise rock singers. Would he slap me in the face? Would he congratulate me, or would he just go away laughing? I guess it could be either of the three, depending on
probably all three,
time and day,
depending on where he was at. And
so
I love David. I haven't seen David in a really long time, but he's a fucking great guy.
Well, if you see him, and if he ever wants to do a good interview,
I'll pass it on for sure.
That don't. That's not. Talk about other shit than us. We always end our interviews here on Veil of Sound with 8 to 10 questions, which are always like roses versus tulips. Which do you like more? Of course, it's roses for me, tulips for my wife. And they always are in some ways related to, in your case, yourself or a certain band. So I'll give you always two alternatives and you choose. Let's make it easy. Minor Threat versus Fugazi.
Oh, fuck. Come on. They can't do that quick. Fucking brain melt. I'm going to go with Minor Threat strictly on Minor Threat. Fuck it. I don't got to explain. It's Minor Threat.
Exactly. Roland's Band versus Black Flag.
Oh, come on. Black Flag.
Although I have to say that Liar is still one of the nicest hardcore songs. Yeah, I know. Soundgarden versus Alice in Chains.
Soundgarden. Mm-hmm. Not even hesitating. I mean, Soundgarden, I remember the first stuff, hearing their first things, which were like almost like Chrome, like kind of fucked up avant-garde more.
Yeah. That's
I was like, I don't think Alice in Chains ever came close to that, having a moment like that. Alice in Chains are basically like a kind of a hair band.
Glam rock.
Converted into grunge. So it's kind of like,
Nirvana versus Pearl Jam.
Nirvana. No hesitation.
Wouldn't have. Yeah. Wine versus beer.
I'm going to go with wine.
Mm-hmm.
And not the nice stuff. I'm talking. You guys don't have MD 2020 over there, do you? In Germany, I don't think there's such a thing as fortified wine, is there?
We got bad Italian wine that we sell for $1 in the local.
This is worse than that. This is fortified. This is where they take shitty wine and then pour grain alcohol into it.
Ooh.
So there's several brands that I was used to be quite fond of in my youth. Mad Dog 2020 was one.
Okay.
Wild Irish Rose, that was another one. And the infamous Thunderbird. You knew when you got hit by the fucking Thunderbird. And that was a favorite because it's $2 for a bottle, And one bottle would fuck you up. So it's like, come on, $2. I'm in. Wine.
I don't want to ask you, or I didn't want to give you Seattle versus Minneapolis because that would be a very uncool thing, I guess. I wanted to give you Los Angeles versus New York.
Oh, Los Angeles by a long shot. No,
because you want the pool, hesitation. Right? Yeah. You're still grieving over the pool. Yeah.
No, Los Angeles is I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's
I did.
It's way more American, and I'm way more comfortable with it. New York is almost European at points in certain ways.
And that's why I like it.
And that's why I don't like it. I like, to me, LA fits my whole upbringing, my whole life. It makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. So it's like, totally fine. Totally
and the fucking weather. Jesus Christ, you can't beat it. Of course, nowadays you have to figure out how to navigate homeless camps to go.
Well, and I think the problem with LA is it's heating up, right? no rain and everything, right? I now give you two questions that are related to your biography and to the places you lived in. Husker Du versus the Replacements.
Gonna go with Husker Du. Grant was like one of my best friends up until he passed. But right now, literally one of my best friends is Chris Mars. But as far as I'm saying Husker Du, because at the time they were way more my speed. Get that? I slid that in their speed, land speed record. That was just way more intense impact on me as a kid than the Replacements had.
Yeah, also because probably very little closer to hardcore, right? So I guess
a little closer.
right?
They were straight up hardcore. If you listen to that land speed records, if you have that record, do you have that record?
I do.
You have it, right? Put it on.
Yeah,
as soon as you get all done here, put it on.
Yeah.
They don't get more hardcore than that record.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's also that's like what you described, right? The development of that band.
Yeah.
Being a real straight up hardcore band, and then developing something that we later on called post-hardcore.
But they totally blended it. It was such a great blend of like that same energy and speed, and then with melodies and hooks, and that was phenomenal. No one else did it nearly as
that
well.
way.
Yeah.
How do you then feel about Sugar?
I'm not a big fan. I just kind of
not a big fan because Sugar is the follow-up for Bob, or not a big fan because the music just doesn't hit you?
The music just never hit me in the same way.
Yeah, never could.
I mean, I liked where Grant went post Husker Du, especially his last couple records before he passed away were fucking some of the best shit he ever did, by bar none. Just phenomenal stuff. But as it's just like it's not like you have to pick one or the other, but I just kind of organically just stayed in the paid more attention to what Grant was doing. It was more relevant than Bob per se.
The two big guitar players from the two big American cities he lived in, Hendrix versus Prince.
Oh, come on. You got to ask that. It's Hendrix.
I had people here who would argue that Prince is one of the best guitar players ever.
He's a fucking great, but the difference between Prince's being a virtuoso guitar player,
and Hendrix
was not a virtuoso. Hendrix destroyed the entire fucking universe and put it all back together with 6 strings. I mean, Hendrix was a fucking 1,000-year, 1,000-year tsunami versus Prince, who was, I'm not belittling Prince at all, but to my mind, when you listen to Purple Haze and imagine that getting played on fucking the radio in 1967, that is still one of the most abrasive, fucked up, you're just like, what the fuck? I mean, can you imagine a 50-year-old in 1967 hearing that? It would literally sound like this to their ears. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we're not even talking about his version of the Star Spangled Banner, which I still remember my host dad back in Atlanta always said, like, that's not music.
And also, too, you have to acknowledge that, Prince went a long way in worshiping Hendrix as well. So it's debatable would Prince be Prince if there wasn't a Hendrix. You could maybe have that conversation.
Yeah. For the next question, I want to know, which sport would you prefer? Football,
bowling,
sport, football, baseball, or basketball?
I honestly could not give a fuck about anything.
Okay, then I'll ask you, the Seahawks or the Vikings?
Well, I'm going to have to call Vikings. Come on. Just because it's a cooler mascot than a Seahawk.
But it's Kirk Cousins. Anyway, last one. Because both acts are from the same city, from Duluth. Lowe versus Dylan.
I'm going to say Dylan just because I've listened to Dylan more.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan's not actually from Duluth. He's from Hibbing.
Yeah, but isn't
He
that
was
like
born in Duluth, but that's because that's the only place that had a hospital up where he lived. If you go to
where I'm
northern
from? That's
Minnesota,
enough.
if you go to northern
No,
Minnesota,
I'm not from Minnesota.
No,
I've
said if
never
you
been
go-
there. I gotta admit,
Okay.
I've
Northern
never been
Minnesota,
there, I
there's
gotta-
not a lot going on. There's a lot of trees, a lot of lakes, not a lot of people. So I mean, it's really funny because Minnesota doesn't really seem to have that big of an affinity for Bob Dylan, even though he's like born and bred here. Like he was born here, lived here too. He was 18 or 19. I don't know exactly what year he went off to New York and then denied he was from Minnesota for many years.
For many years.
Oh, when they asked
Also
him,
denied having a German name.
What, Zimmerman?
Yeah, Zimmerman.
Yeah, I don't think that was as intense for him as denying he was from Minnesota. He was from Arizona, what he used to say. Like, Arizona, dude, who gives a fuck? Is this as bad as Minnesota? Just
yeah. Yeah. There you die of dehydration.
Yes.
In Minnesota, you die of frostbite.
Yeah. Don't pass out in the snowbank. There's some good advice, kid.
Yeah, and I don't know which border is worse, the border to Mexico or the border to Canada. One brings in snow and the other brings in drugs. Well,
yeah, I'd rather be sitting at the Mexican border is a fucking nightmare to go across because they're intensely going through everything all the time. Whereas the Canadian border, up until recent years, pre 9/11, it was literally like.
that wasn't even a border, right?
There was guys on both sides of it, but they wouldn't even stop you. They're just like, they look like Americans. Come on. Or they look like Canucks. Come on. No one gave a shit. Now it's not quite that free and easy anymore. Especially with COVID shit. Still playing that game.
So we got to say that we must be, if we're talking about playing the game, we must be happy that the Melvins are still playing their game. And I must say that I'm very happy that you are, at least for at the moment, 2 full lengths playing the I'm not only distributing live records and EPs game again.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
If we get more full lengths by AmRep, I'm very happy about it. And I know at least one Canadian band, Ken Mode, who would love to publish a record.
They're good. I like Ken Mode. There's good stuff out there, but it's just like I said, that thing where it's just like,
yeah, it's got to pay in a way, right?
It's kind of like when you have kids and you just go, do you want to like start having kids again? You're like, it was great. Don't get me wrong. I fucking loved it, but
now I'm 55. Do I ever want to have another child? No, maybe not.
I'm done. I'm always willing to try. I just don't want to have.
Yeah. Production is always nice, right? Like for production process. Well. So, Tom, thanks for your time. Thanks for all of this.
Thank you.
Thanks for putting out the new record. And have a good evening, my friend.
You too. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Yep. You too.